Today we are going to take a look at one of the most beloved builds in Baldur's Gate 3, the Throwbarian. The main focus of this build is to throw stuff onto enemies, and yes, of course you can throw enemies at each other if you want to. We will exploit this whole thing of throwing weapons to its maximum and create a perfect synergy with the Tavern Brawler feat for even higher damage and attack rolls. And the cool part about this build here is that it gets quite strong early in the game, since we find some of the essential gear as early as in Act 1, and at level 4 we already got the Tavern Brawler feat, which just gives us the first power spike. And yes, it just gets better and better the more we get into the late game. We get more attacks, more throws, more damage, and most importantly, more fun. And with the spirit of this build of throwing stuff, throwing enemies and laughing and mocking them, we have our main thought in our head, and I would say we go right into the beginning of the creation of this absolute masterpiece. And of course, we start right in the character creation. So right there we have like two main options. The first one is to either play a custom character or a companion. And if you decide to play a companion, this build works quite well with Karloch because it just fits her. The whole character, the whole barbarian scene, this is just the perfect build for Karloch. So if you want to choose her and make a companion playthrough, this would be the way to go. Or you could just use this build for her as your in-game companion. The second option is to just pick any race you want to play, because the race is the least influencing aspect for our build. And if you really want to play, for example, a gnome or whatever, you can do that, of course. Just keep in mind that it will be a tiny amount weaker than as if you go with option 3, where we pick the best fitting race for this build. But as I said, if you have more fun with another race, just pick it. I imagine it will be quite funny to have a little man or a little woman throwing stuff around, even throwing some little other peoples around. So there are some options. But with that said, let's go to the best fitting races for this build if you really want to get the most out of it. The first one would be the Serial Thiefling, which is actually the same as Karloch is. So that's one of the reasons why she really fits this build. With that you get Searing Smite on level 3 and Branding Smite on level 5, which gives her the ability for higher damage. Just to give you a quick overview, with Searing Smite, your weapon flares with white hot intensity. It deals your weapon damage an extra d6 fire damage and marks the target with Searing Smite. And with Searing Smite, the target takes 1d6 fire damage every turn until it succeeds a Constitution saving throw. So it is a quite nice additional spell to have if you want to play a Thiefling or a Karloch. And the other spell you get a little later would be Branding Smite, which just possibly marks a target with light, preventing it from turning invisible and dealing 2d6 radiant damage. The main thing here just to consider is it won't work with our throwing weapons, but it is a good alternative to use in some situations, since you still can do melee attacks with your weapons and apply it. You don't have to always throw weapons with this build, of course. Other options would be the Wood Elf and the Half Wood Elf for higher movement speed, which is always pretty nice to have. The last perfect option for this would be the Githyanki in my opinion, because she gets some additional features like the Psionic Jump or Misty Step, which is just perfect for repositioning. And if you would Githyanki only take for her Misty Step, for example, because you can teleport at some points, there are also alternatives where you can get the spell in-game later. So it shouldn't influence your decision that much. Maybe just a tiny thing to add to the races. You could also, if you really want to play a tiny character, I would recommend you to choose the Dwarf, because in the game there is a specific weapon which has a synergy with Dwarfs, where you can throw your weapons and it deals more damage if you're playing a Dwarf race and so on. I will link this weapon in the video description so you can look into it, because I won't go that much into detail in this video, but it is a nice thing to consider if you really want to play a smaller race for this build. But after our race, we of course will take the Barbarian as our class. There's nothing to add here. For the background we keep it rather simple. We go with the Soldier because it just fits the character perfect. It gets the skills in Athletics and Intimidation, which is just fitting for this. Then next off, for our ability scores, we will keep it quite simple. We don't even go that far off from the recommended scores. A little bit we will. For strength we definitely push this up to 17. Since this build runs with strength, our throw capabilities scale with strength, not with dexterity, and the Tavern Brawler feat we take later on also scales insanely well with strength, and most importantly our damage and attack rolls will be influenced by this ability. For dexterity and constitution we have 3 options. Either push dexterity to 16 and constitution to 14 or the other way around. It goes a little bit with preference here, but in my opinion dexterity is overall better to get to 16. Because first off, barbarians aren't that weak anyway, so we don't have to push constitution all the way up. And in addition to that, we are going to have rage in this class, which will increase our resistance even higher. So you see where this goes. And after this, with dexterity, we get a high initiative, which is especially nice for this build. Because the earlier we are in fights, the higher the chance we can maybe remove one enemy out of the fight before they even get a chance to do anything. And it's generally speaking always better to start fights earlier than the others. But for the second options, you can of course turn this around and give dexterity to 14 and constitution to 16 if you want to be even more tanky and take the safer route. It just depends on how you want to play it. And as mentioned, there is a third option because we have 2 leftover points which we can put into anything we want. You could, for example, put this in charisma if you want a little bit of a charming main character for interactions, or you put it in wisdom because we are going to have quite a lot of wisdom checks in this game in general, so it just depends if you prefer one over the other. But what you can also do here is, which is relevant when you meet Auntie Evil later on, I don't want to spoil anything, but you could also put the last 2 points in constitution and get it to 15. And when we get to Auntie Evil, there is a scene where we can get a +1 bonus from her, and we can just increase our constitution then to 16, and we can just use this +1 depending on which level we are, either to just push strength immediately to 18 with this bonus and getting the Tavern Brawler feat on level 4 and increase constitution then to 16, or the other way around. If we are already at level 4, we will have strength already on 18, but we can push then constitution to 16 with the Auntie Evil bonus. So it just depends how fast you are, what you're going to do in the world, and so on. And for the skills, we are not going to do anything special here because we can only choose between 3 available skills. And for this we are going with animal handling and survival. Just because I think it's the best one here. I don't think I need nature that much in this class, and that's the reason why I picked the others tools. One thing you can just consider here, if you, for example, are taking another background or maybe another race, this whole list here can be a little bit different. Maybe you can choose a few other skills than I can, because for example, if I go back to background, choose the Outlander, then you can see I can suddenly pick Intimidation, which I couldn't with the soldier background. So it just depends on which things you chose until this point. So don't be confused if there is something different here. Just choose that which fits you best. And that's basically it. So after that, we of course have to make our characters sexy looking, dangerous looking, and so on. And for this, look at this gorgeous man. Okay, enough. Let's go into the leveling. This is where we're grading our dear Throwbarian. So let's just start right off with level 2, where we don't even have to choose anything. Great. But we get a class feature called Danger Sense, which gives us an advantage on dexterity saving throws against traps, spells and surfaces. But the main thing here will be spells, but it's just a feature we get, so don't worry that much. We also get an action, Reckless Attack, which is a really cool thing, because we get until our next turn advantage on attack rolls. It says that enemies get advantage too, but it's not that bad honestly, because we have rage and the damage we receive is limited anyways. It profits us more than enemies, so it's just a nice thing to have. The only thing here which you have to consider is it only works with melee attacks and not throwing attacks, so it's not the best feature for our specific build, but it is fine. Even though we build a thrower, we will still be able to get some melee attacks in from time to time, where you can just take advantage of this skill if you want to, of course. And that's basically it with level 2. At level 3, this is where it gets interesting, because we can choose our subclass. And this is where the build gets going. There's only one choice here, the Berserker class, because with this subclass, our rage gets Frenzy. And with it, we get 2 things, the Frenzied Strike and the Enraged Throw. And our main focus here will be, of course, the Enraged Throw, because as we all know, we are going to throw things. And the cool part about this is, both of these attacks work as a bonus action. So basically what we can do at this stage is we can do normal attacks, and in addition to that we can throw something at enemies or an enemy onto another enemy. So it's just already pretty nice. Then at level 4, this is where we get another immense power spike, because we can finally take our first feat. And without any second thought, we are just going to choose Tavern Brawler. Because, first off, we can get Strength to 18, so we get that additional Strength modifier bonus. And second off, which makes this feat so amazing, it adds double the amount of our Strength modifier to both our attack and damage rolls, which is just amazing and absolutely insane. Because we are just doing with this one much more damage. Absolutely insane. And that's level 4. Then at level 5, we don't have to choose anything, we just get our dear earned extra attack feature, which gives us an additional power spike, and with this we can just attack a second time after our normal attack. And second off, we get fast movement, but just consider it is nice to have, but it only works without heavy armor. After that, at level 6, we will go into the multi-classing world, because with the level 5 Barbarian we got all our main things we wanted. And after that, it offers less than if we would go into another class. So we're just going to do that. And for this, we go into the Rogue class. The reason for this is the Thief subclass, because we get an additional bonus action with it, which is absolutely insane for a throwing barbarian. Because if you remember, Enraged Throw is a bonus action, so we can connect the dots here. The Rogue chosen, we get additional skills here. And for this, there are two options. Either we take Intimidation and Perception, because Intimidation just fits this character, and Perception is just a really nice skill to have because of all the perception checks for traps, hidden enemies and so on in the game, and there are quite a lot of them. Stealth and acrobatics are also pretty nice, and in my opinion especially stealth, because we get a pretty nice benefit from hidden attacks and maybe getting the first attack in before the enemies can even do a single move. Maybe we can throw a weapon from a hidden distant area, surprise them and just get a whole round in before they can even do anything. Just amazing to have, and maybe just the right way to go here in increasing the stealth here. But as always, I would say it's just personal preference. But of course, you can just do whatever you would like. Then at level 7, nothing special here. We just get our rogue to level 2 and we get a feature Cunning action where we can just use hide, disengage or dash as a bonus action, which is just a nice additional thing to have. Then at the next level we get the rogue to level 3 and we finally get to choose our subclass. And in this case, I already mentioned we are going to take the Thief, because we finally get our second bonus action, which means an extra throw, attack when raging, which means extra fun, which means success. Then at level 9 we can just go and level up our rogue to 4 and take our next feat, which in this case would be the ability score increasement. We just pump strength all the way up to 20 and that's it. There's also another option which I will go into it a little bit later, because you could also just start now multi-classing into another class and just instead of increasing your strength, you could also just use some elixirs you get into the game, because there are some which are pumping your strength to 21 or even to 27. So you could just, instead of getting this feat, get an earlier path into another class. But for the sake of this video, we will just keep this rather simple, and I will tell you later what I meant with this, so you can decide if you want to do this or if it's not worth the struggle and so on. Okay, so then at level 10 we make another crazy thing. Now we multi-class one last time into the fighter class to get more actions and even more critical hits. You will see what I mean with that in a second. So at level 1 with the fighter we can choose our fighting style, and my first thought of course would go to great weapon fighting, which is an absolutely amazing fighting style, but sadly it won't work with throwing weapons. If I'm wrong, you can correct me here, but as to my knowledge it won't work together. But other than that, we can just go with defense, which gives us a little bit more of an armor class, because I think all the other fighting styles aren't that compatible with this build. At the next level, we get fighter to level 2, and once again we don't have to do anything. We just get an amazing action, which is called the action Surge. With this one, we get an extra action per short rest, which is just a really nice feature to have and to use in some crucial moments while fighting or whatever. You can use it when and wherever you want, where you think it's fitting you best. Then for the last level, we finish this build off with just one simple way. We go into our fighter subclass and we are going to choose the champion subclass, which increases our chance for critical hits and so increases the chance for more damage, And this just finishes off our whole build for this one. Now we go to our next chapter, which would be all the items and a little bit more stuff, which are just nice for this build. I thought the best way to probably do this is to show you what gear you can get as early as in Act 1, the gear you can get in Act 2, and then all the things which will be the late game build with the items you get in Act 3. To start it right off, we are gonna look at our dear first weapon we want to get, which is the returning pike. When we throw it, it will return to our hand. So if we throw it, it will return to us and we can throw it again and so on. So it will always return into our hands. You can get this pike rather quick in the game in the goblin camp by a trader there. I will link it in the description, and I will basically link every other item in the description so you can look everything up, so that I just don't have to go into too much detail where to find it, because you can just look it up if you really want to use the items. Then for our headwear, we don't have anything that's special in Act 1, so just use what you pick up, because there isn't anything which works that well with this build early on. For the cloak, the same, we just get one as late as Act 3, so don't worry that much here. Same for the armor, just use anything until we get the one we want to use. But for the gloves, we get the Gloves of Uninhibited Kushigo, because with this one we can deal an additional 1d4 damage with throwing attacks and attacks with improvised weapons. So we basically just do the whole time 1d4 of additional damage, which is absolutely insane. For the boots, we are gonna take the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, because with this we can't get enwebbed, entangled and ensnared and can slip on grease or ice, which is just a nice little bonus. But the more important part here is the spell we get with this, the Misty Step. And with Misty Step, this is basically just a teleporting spell where you can just reposition yourself on the battlefield, get to the high ground to get that height advantage and so on. So it's just a nice spell to have overall. For our amulets, we have two options. The first one would be the Amulet of Misty Step, which if you, for example, don't have the Disintegrating Nightwalker boots, you could also just use the Amulet of the Misty Step, because you get the same spell here, so you just have a little bit of variety. This would be the first option. The second option, which you can use, is the Brood Mother's Revenge. And this one here is pretty nice, because when we are getting healed, our weapon becomes coated in magic and deals an additional 1d6 damage. But the main thing here, which you just have to consider, it is, I would say, suboptimal, because it doesn't work with throwing weapons, it just works up with a melee attack, so just keep that in mind. I just didn't find any amulet which fits this build that well early on in the game. Then for the rings, we got two pretty insane rings, which stays with us probably until the end game. First off, the Costage Band, which gives our weapon attacks also 2 acid damage in addition to our normal damage. And it works as it should with thrown weapons, not like the Brood Mother's Revenge where we have to make a melee attack. Then the second ring would be the Ring of Flinching, which is absolutely amazing, because we just get 1d4 of additional bonus to our throw damage. This is basically the Act 1 gear I would use for this build. If you know anything else, tell me, which we could use for those empty spots, but otherwise it works well with this. I will show you right now how it looks. So this right here is just with level 4, where we get the Tavern Brawler feat, because I think this is the best way to show the first power spike and how good this build is early on. As you can see here, I'm just throwing my weapon, dealing like 30 damage per throw, and with level 4 I'm already doing like 60 damage with 2 throws per turn, which is pretty nice, I would say. And at the next level we already get the bonus attack from Barbarian, so we have like 2 main attacks and a bonus attack where we can already do a pretty insane amount of damage. Pretty nice for this early in the game. So as I said, if we reach Act level 2, we can get a little bit more equipment. And for the first part, we can get a helm, which is this one here, which is the only one which really makes sense for this build. The other bonus from all the others, I didn't think there was anything in it which is really nice for this, because with this one we can increase our critical hit chance by 1 while obscured. Of course, it is a little bit situational, but it is the best we can get here. Then for the armor, we can get here the Enraging Heart Garb. With this one, while we rage, we generate 2 turns of wrath. So we just get 1 additional damage per attack, which is just nice. And of course, as you can see here, we can also increase our constitution with 2 up to 20. Then for the next thing, which would be on our other hand, the Dark Fire Shortbow, which is just nice because we can just equip this and get resistance to fire and cold damage. And we get the haste spell. And with the haste spell we can just target ourselves or an ally to become hastened, which just brings us to gain an action, become faster and harder to hit, which is just amazing. Just keep in mind that if you are doing this spell here and you gain another action and then you rage, that this spell here will disappear because it is a concentration spell and it is up for 10 turns, and if we rage we will replace that spell with our raging. It's just a nice little add-on to have. It's not essential, but the haste spell is just nice. You can of course just put this shortbow on some other companion and cast the haste spell in a different way. There are some options. It's just a nice little thing to have in addition to everything else. Then in Act 2 we also get another ring. We can choose if we want to, the Risky Ring. And with this one we gain advantage on attack rolls, but we also receive disadvantage on saving throws, but I would say the advantage on attack rolls overshadows this. So you can here just decide if you want to take this instead of the Castish Band. It just depends on how high you want your hit percentage to be. I will just keep the Castish Band for now. So let's go and look into it with those additional items here. So with the items equipped, I just leveled up to level 8 because this is where I think is the next interesting part. Because we have the extra attack from the Barbarian and the Thief subclass edition where we get the bonus attack, and as you can see here, we just get quite a lot of throws in, quite a lot of damage, and this build really starts to shine. It's just really funny, and of course with the other companions integrated and so on, and maybe with some additional buffs where you can even do more damage with some throws, etc. It will be just amazing. So for the last items, which will be of course the best ones here, because those are the late game items which you can only find in Act 3, let's just go over them one by one. First one is the Severok's Horned Helmet, which is just basically the same as we have, just in a better version. It also reduces the roll number by 1 to hit a critical hit. And we can't be frightened and cannot be afflicted with other emotional entering conditions, plus nice to have. Constitution saving throws +1, also nice to have. Then we have an option here. This is just preference, I would say. We could just use this Bone Spike Garb where we gain 15 temporary hit points whenever we rage, which is just a nice addition because we will rage a lot. Extra HP, always nice. But the next second thing is, where we get really tanky here is with the Exoskeletal Endurance, because it will reduce all incoming damage by 2. When the wearer is struck by a melee attack, the attacker takes 3 piercing damage. It's just a nice piece of armor, it just depends on which you want. So for the cloak, we finally get one. And this one is pretty nice, because while we hide, the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1. And this effect can stack, so we essentially just keep on decreasing the number we have to hit for critical attacks. And we will always get our first attacks hidden in, because we are sneaky boys, and this is just amazing for this. For the amulet, we have there the Amulet of Greater Health, which is just nice because we can set our Constitution score to 23. We also have advantage on Constitution saving throw checks. It's just a really nice thing to have because it pushes our Constitution all the way up to 23. And you of course can always respec your character, put some points somewhere else, and just put, for example, this amulet on because it increases your constitution to 23 either way. Then for our weapons, this is where it gets really interesting, because there we get Nairuna, which is just an absolutely amazing weapon. First off, it also will return like the returning spike to our hand if we throw it. We cannot get forced to drop the weapon, which is also nice, and when thrown, the weapon creates an explosion that deals 3 to 12 thunder damage in a 6-meter blast centered on the target, which is just absolutely amazing because we just deal our normal damage, but in addition to that, also 3 to 12 thunder damage and making a blast wave around it. It also shines with a glowing light in a radius of 6 meters, we get weapon enchantment +3, where we get +3 to attack rolls and deals +3 bonus damage. Just nice to have everything of this. Then for our other hand, we replace our bow and we get the dead shot, because with this one it's absolutely amazing, because once again the number we need to roll for a critical hit will be reduced by 1. And with the other things combined, our number gets lower and lower and we will hit a lot of critical shots with this build. And if you remember, if we level up our character all the way to 12, which will be the thing I'm doing now, and then show you how the character is with full end, everything on and so on, we at the end get the champion subclass for the fighter. This will reduce the number we need to roll for a critical hit once again by 1. So, and for this one here, I just, as I mentioned, leveled the character up all the way to the maximum like I showed in the leveling section before. And I thought it would be nice to do it with the same enemies, since you can see the direct comparison between the level 8 with the little bit weaker items and the full maxed out character with the best items here. And as you can see here, I'm just destroying them all in one round with like, I don't even know how many throws those were, but I even had one's action surge left, which I could have used to just finish them off before they could even do anything. So let's get over to one last thing I want to cover, which are just some little things, which would be some possible elixirs you could use. The first one would be the elixir of bloodlust, which just gives you 5 temporary hit points and an additional action when you kill an enemy. And this is absolutely nice if you want to use it and you are not using any other elixir or something else which you need more than this one here. But what you can also do, because we pushed quite a lot of resources into our strength, there are 2 potions. The first one would be the elixir of the hill giant strength, which increases your strength to 21. If we drink this, you can see our strength is on 21 until our next long rest. So this could be just a nice way to, if you want to rather use elixirs instead of pushing or putting all your things into strength, you can just respec your character, leave strength all the way down, put it into something else and just use this potion here. Or the other one would be elixir of the cloud giant strength, which increases your strength even higher to 27, which is absolutely insane, because I mean 27 strength is just absolutely insane. We don't have to say more about this. You can just decide. I will link also them in the description so you can see where you can get them from and if it's worth the struggle to get all of this instead of just pushing strength up. It just depends on how you want to play the game, if I'm honest. Then the last and really last thing I just want to mention real quick, because I mentioned it earlier, was the thing that if you want to play a smaller character, play a dwarf for this build, because there is a weapon in the game which is called the Dwarfen Thrower. And with this weapon, it also will return to you when you throw it, of course it will, but a dwarf throwing this warhammer deals an extra 1 to 8 bludgeoning damage. And if the target is large, huge or gargantuan creature, the strike deals an additional 2 to 16 bludgeoning damage, which is just a nice possible other weapon to have, and I think it's just fun because it's just made for this, for a dwarf which just throws his hammer and gets it back and so on. So I just want to mention that real quick. But that is mainly it. That was everything I have to say about my Throwbarian build, and I hope it was useful for some of you, and if not, tell me what you missed in this video. And otherwise, I always appreciate if you are trying to better this build, maybe some items I missed, I don't know, or some other things you think could be nice for this build in general. But otherwise, I will greatly appreciate every like and comment, of course, and thanks for watching and have a nice day and see you the next time. Bye.